I get questions often at Pastoring the Executive, and here's one that came in, and it's a question that I'm seeing being asked in a lot of different places, but here's the exact question. Charlie, is it time for me to pivot? That might be a question that you have. Is it time for you to pivot? There's so much change going on in the world. Well, let's start with this. We know this, that if you don't change, you'll die. If you don't pivot, things can get really, really bad. So we're in an environment right now, the world system, if you will, it's different, it's changing. It's changing rapidly. I want you to think about companies like, the taxi cab versus Uber. The taxi cab companies really pivoted, I think, too late, and Uber and Lyft have just really taken the lion's share of the market share. What about places like Compaq Computer versus Dell? Compaq Computer is not even around anymore because they didn't pivot. They didn't realize they had all this inventory that they had built up, and inventory was becoming obsolete. They were dealing with warehouses and all of this type of stuff. And Dell Computers kind of changed the game because they wouldn't even ship you. All the computers were made to order. So they got rid of all the inventory carrying costs and those types of things. So Dell pivoted, Compaq didn't. What about the iPhone? Remember, it used to be BlackBerry. The executives at BlackBerry, leadership at BlackBerry, they laughed at iPhone. They said it's a toy and nobody wants this type of a keypad. I mean, BlackBerry, that's where it's at. They didn't pivot, and look what happened to them. So you need to pivot. But I want to give you 3 ways to help you pivot, 3 things that you can consider doing in challenging times. Number 1, you could play defense. Just play defense. Just allow things to come in and then deal with them when they come in. Number 2, you can wait everything out. You could wait out COVID-19 or whatever the new challenge is. You kind of hibernate and just kind of hope that things work out. Or number 3, you can go on the offense. You can go on the attack. So those are really your 3 options. Again, play defense, wait it out, or go on the offense. Obviously, you need to be going on the offense. It really does start, though, when you go on the offense, it starts with your mindset. What's going on in here? You're going to wrestle with 3 things. It might be because you need to pivot, and you need to make some drastic changes, but maybe your mind is telling you, man, I can't. I know I need to go from here to there, but I just can't. Or maybe it's, can I? Can I do these things? Or maybe the right question is, how can I? How can I? That's a question we need to be thinking about as we're talking about pivoting. Another thing that can get in the way of you pivoting is we start to think about the things in the past, a past failure. I should have done this, or remember that time. Remember, it was Walt Disney who was fired by a Kansas City newspaper. And you want to know why the editor fired him? Because he thought he lacked creativity or imagination. I'm glad that Walt Disney didn't quit. What about Steven Spielberg? He applied 3 different times to get to be included in the USC film department, and he was rejected. It's Steven Spielberg. So someone put a stamp and said, you're not good enough to come here, and he was able to overcome that. So we know that our past does not indicate our future. So we need to get out of the past. As a matter of fact, God's word says you have no guarantee of tomorrow. So don't even worry about tomorrow. And you can't change the past. You just have today. So one step at a time, starting with today. The last thing I would have you consider as you're thinking about pivoting is ask better questions. So I'm just going to assume for a moment that you have a business, you got an enterprise that you're running, and I want you to think about your clients. Ask yourself, ask your teams better questions. Here's a question for you. How can our organization help people or inspire people during this time? If you start focusing on how you can help others, that's going to change the game. It's going to change the outcome. So stop thinking about yourself, thinking about how you can help during a time like this. When you start asking that question, you'll start to see where and when and how you need to pivot. So you need to pivot, and that question will help you a great deal. So in closing, as we're talking about pivoting, let's stop selling and let's start educating. We pivot when we understand that we have to change. And the market economy, the world in which we live in, has said, listen, it's time for you to change. So make sure you pivot, or otherwise it could be BlackBerry and Apple. You don't want to be BlackBerry during a time like this. I hope that helps you.